seconds to go. We need a Minneapolis miracle. Case on a deep drop, steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side. Off by Diggs. Stay up. Oh, he got loose. Oh, my God. 30. No 10. Touchdown. Are you kidding me? Miracle finish. It's a Minneapolis miracle. Oh, my God. No way. Oh! What a miracle finish.
And welcome to the State of Purple podcast. My name is AJ Mansour. I'm joined once again by my co-host Jack Day. Jack, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing well. I feel like I'm like we haven't spoke for a while on the show, obviously, but I feel like I say this almost every week, but we're like fully entered in that week of like the sporting world where there's absolutely, well, there's obviously some stuff to talk about. That's why we're here, but there's really not a whole lot going on. The NBA could come to an end tonight. The NHL is done. The Twins are struggling. And all that's really left to look forward to in the state of Minnesota is the Minnesota Vikings. And with training camp starting next week, there's a lot of stuff to look forward to.
As a Vikings fan, you should be used to that. I mean, this is the feeling that we get most years. The Twins are not good, but they're working on fixing that. I guess the trade drama is something with the Twins, but yeah, Minnesota Vikings kind of have already captured the attention of Minnesota sports fans, and that's what we're here to talk about. Continuing getting ready for the season. We took a couple weeks off. We had some vacations, had some things mixed in there, and now we're back. And it's going to be basically, Jack, full bore from here to the end of the season. Next week, training camp. Vikings report for training camp. We'll have a ton to talk about. You're actually going to be out there this year, which is going to be sweet. I'm going to be out there as well. Maybe we can do some stuff from training camp. We'll see what's available and what we can put out to everybody. But we will definitely have weekly reports and breaking news coverage as it comes. That's the State of Purple podcast. That's what this is, and we'll continue to carry that through the preseason, through the training camp, through the regular season, and then next year in the postseason. Hopefully, while we're hoisting that Lombardi. I don't know if that's realistic or not, but the reality is there. Now, Jack, you mentioned this is kind of the calm before the storm in many ways. And for the Vikings, that kind of was the case until we got some news earlier this week about an injury. Injury reports are not something you typically hear from the Minnesota Vikings or about the Minnesota Vikings during the offseason unless there's a big injury like an Adrian Peterson ACL rehab or something like that. But we did have an injury pop up. Tell us what the news was the other day, Jack, and how that might impact this team as they report to training camp.
Yeah, if you would have told me this a couple months ago, I think the entire Vikings fan base would have been freaking out a little bit. I don't know. Did you see the graphic just popped up there? But I think the interior of that defensive line last year.
We're a little rusty. That's our transition graphic. We're good. You can keep talking over it.
But that's true.
Take this rust off.
My bad.
This is preseason for us too, Jack. We're
that's
getting
true.
It.
But yeah, news came out yesterday morning, I believe. I think it was Rappaport tweeted out that Michael Pierce suffered calf strain or some sort of calf injury while training and preparing for training camp. If you would have told me that a couple weeks ago, or like last year, for example, when the Vikings went into 2020 with Michael Pierce opting out, the depth was so thin along that interior of the defensive line. It wasn't pretty. I'm sure you remember that football game on Christmas Day with Alvin Kamara running for 5 or 6 touchdowns. I don't even know how many touchdowns it was. I lost count. But this year is going to be a lot different than that. And I think if you would have told me without Michael Pierce, if the Vikings interior, they have at the nose tackle spot, you can slide Delvin Tomlinson over to that role. And oh, by the way, they signed Sheldon Richardson, who is more than capable of being a starting 3-tech for any NFL team, in my opinion. So I think there's still the depth behind those two isn't great, but it's good that they have 2 starting caliber players. And on top of it, it doesn't sound like the Michael Pierce injury is too serious. I saw there was a doctor on Twitter, his name is escaping me, saying they can linger, but the good news is it happened now instead of preseason week 3. He's not going to have to miss. He might miss a couple weeks of training camp, but it sounds like as of now, like I know Vikings fans are aware of this and the lingering injuries with Daniil last year, where it wasn't something that anyone was too concerned about right away. It obviously turned into a bigger concern. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like it's as serious, and it sounds like Michael Pierce might sit on the sidelines for the first couple weeks of training camp and then be ready to go for the regular season.
Yeah, timing of it is as good as it can be for an injury, right? The one thing, Jack, that I think this does raise some concerns surrounding is players' injuries coming off of weird off seasons, players' injuries coming off of sitting out last year. We saw some situations in the CFL. I think a couple weeks ago, I forget which team it was. A team reported and had like 3 Achilles tears on day one during a stretching drill. I think I saw that Cam Akers has suffered an Achilles injury as well. These are those weird tendon injuries that we're worried about. I shouldn't say that they tend to pop up when you have long-term shelving of not moving around and not doing things, because we don't really have anything to compare this to, right? A pandemic where players opted out and sat out for a season, or a long off season, or a weird off season, whatever those things are, where you're not at the facility as much. We haven't had that in the past, so there's really nothing to compare it to. But even for someone who's not a doctor, right, this makes sense that those soft tissues, those tendons that are usually loose and stretched and ready to go when you are active and going all the time, when you get back into it and you try and push it maybe a little too hard or go back to what you're used to, there's some things that can pop up and some things that can be weird, and that concern lingers for all athletes, let alone for the Minnesota Vikings. But there's also the opportunity and the potential that this is just a weird injury, right? Not anything that has any relation to him sitting out last season or any lack of training this offseason. We're not doing any of that. It could just be an injury, because injuries pop up, and it seems to happen to the Minnesota Vikings. But like you mentioned, they're in as good as a position as you could possibly be, timing-wise, depth-wise, to have a starter with an injury. And we don't know the severity of the injury either. They don't give injury reports in the preseason. They don't give injury reports through training camp. They may tell you that somebody's sitting out or what they're doing, but they're not going to say, they don't do the whole questionable, doubtful, those sorts of scenarios. So we don't know how serious this injury is, and we probably won't know, but we'll just see him when he misses some time. But maybe something to get used to, just this idea of injury news and how this is going to play out through training camp. Hopefully not anything serious, but as we see again already throughout the league, these things are happening.
Yeah, and we've seen it time and time again with Mike Zimmer and his staff. They are going to keep these injuries as disclosed as possible. They don't want this stuff getting out. It was similar. That's a Neil Hunter injury. There was people saying last year this could be something that lingers into the regular season. Hey, you might need to get surgery. There was also people saying there's a chance that he suits up and he's playing week 1, week 2, or week 3. I think the plan was to have Yannick Ngakoue starting on the opposite side of Daniil Hunter. So maybe there was a little bit of a gray area there where Zimmer might not have even known the seriousness of the injury. But yeah, injuries they're not a fun thing. I know Vikings fans are accustomed to this. So every time injuries pop up in training camp, preseason, during practice, I just go back to my college days. I was sitting in one of my classes when the Teddy Bridgewater news broke. And I just remember I dropped my phone on the table and it was like a smaller class and everyone just like stopped and looked. And I was like, if you guys are Vikings fans, just check your phone and you'll understand the pain that I'm going through right now. But they're not fun. But I think I'm hopeful right now, and coming from kind of some of the doctors that I've seen on Twitter, the Michael Pierce injury, it doesn't seem as serious. And like I said, the depth along that interior of the defensive line with having still 2 starting worthy players there is huge, and it's going to help this state of Viking 2021 a lot more than it did in 2020, where they had literally no depth at the position.
Right. And again, you'll see on the comments on the screen right now, Bill's telling us that we're overreacting. That's fine. There's nothing to talk about, Bill. There's nothing else to talk about right now. So we're breaking down the potential injury there. This is a great reminder that this is an interactive podcast recording. If you are available to watch this, or if you're watching this right now on social media through KFAN, you can comment in that the comment section on the feed wherever you're watching, and it'll pop up on the screen, and you can be part of this conversation as well. And if you're listening on iTunes or iHeartRadio, next time you set up for those alerts, and you can get those alerts and partake in this interactive chat chat that we have every Tuesday going forward through the Minnesota Vikings season. Jack, the official training camp kicks off next week. Players will report. The quarterbacks and rookies will get there first, and then we'll see the veterans come in, and practice will get going. Next week, we will do some of those previews. We'll do some of those camp previews, position battles, those sorts of things that we can be looking forward to as we kick off training camp and try and assess what the coaches are trying to assess. But for now, Bill, all we have to talk about is injuries, and we're going to mix in a little bit of Green Bay Packers conversation as well, because it's the conversation that just won't seem to go away. Three nuggets popped up this week when you talk about Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. And will he, won't he report to training camp? Will he, won't he be the quarterback for the team this year? We have had a situation where a report on Twitter popped up about deep cleaning his home, and is he getting ready to sell his house? We have a report about the country club situation. This was a Pat McAfee report this morning that Aaron Rodgers claimed that the country club renewal, which everyone was all crazy about, that he renewed his country club in Green Bay and he's going to come back because of that, confirmed that it was an automatic renewal, that it wasn't a decision that he made, but an automatic renewal that just happens unless you go in and tell it not to happen. And then the big one, I think this is the big one. I believe it was an Adam Schefter report that popped up and said this, I think it was just this morning actually, that Aaron Rodgers was offered a 2-year extension to his contract that would keep him in Green Bay for, I think, 5 years and would make him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He declined that option. He declined that extension. What, Jack, does that tell you, if anything, different about this saga that we are watching play out in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers?
So personally, I've kind of been on the side of things where I've been gearing up. As a Minnesota sports fan, I think it's always fair to kind of assume the absolute worst thing is going to happen. And I think, at least as of last week, 2 weeks ago, I was fairly certain that we were going to see a story saying Aaron Rodgers is expected to be at training camp. It's actually gone in the opposite direction. And I think it's been all over Packers Twitter. There's people questioning legitimacy by an Adam Schefter report. Like, Adam Schefter has been in this business for 15, 20, 30 years. I don't even know. He's been doing ever since I was a little kid watching ESPN. He has been the face of breaking news around the NFL. So you have to take into consideration anything that comes from him. He might be having a little bit of fun with it, kind of saying something, tweaking his words every other couple of weeks. But the fact of the matter stays the same. He was just offered to become one of the highest, I think it was the highest, not only the highest paid quarterback of the league, but the highest paid payer in the NFL this year, or whenever that extension would have hit the books. And he turned it down. The Pat McAfee segment is also great. That's on my Twitter. I retweeted that like an hour ago. And he's saying from his source, he says source right away, but the actual source is a text from Aaron Rodgers saying, it's a pretty good, Packers fans, if you want to get a legitimate source, maybe go straight to the source and you can go watch that video. But it was just weird how someone came out with that story about the house cleaning, and he said, kind of negated that, saying, I haven't had someone other than his own personal cleaner clean my house in 10 years. So that was odd. And then he kind of says the same thing that you just said about the country club. It's a self-renewing membership to the country club. It wasn't like Aaron Rodgers went back to the country club in Green Bay and said, take my money, I'm back, I'm playing football for the Green Bay Packers, I need to be able to golf. That wasn't the case. It automatically re-upped, and it's starting to look more and more like there's a chance that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. Like I said, us being in Minnesota, I don't think it's fair to get our hopes up too high quite yet, but everything is kind of going in that direction when he's already turning. If it's not the money, there's clearly a disconnect between him and some people in that organization, because if it's not the money and the other two things that we brought up, it's a weird story, and it's been going on for 3-4 months now, since the Thursday of draft night, I believe. And it's not going away. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't show up next week, I don't know. It's going to be the storyline of the offseason. It's going to be very Brett Favre 2008, 2009-esque. And I think it's going to be something that'll be very entertaining for Vikings fans to follow along with.
But here's the rub, Jack. This is, you mentioned it, so totally Minnesota Vikings fans, to have Aaron Rodgers just report And it's so very Aaron Rodgers, by the way, also to just report to camp, act like nothing happened, claim that the media blew everything out of proportion, and go out and just do what he does. Now, I think that even he can't act like that completely and convince people. I think that there's enough, where there's smoke, there's fire situation to understand that he's not happy, that something needs to change, whether that's the leadership, whether that's the front office, whether it's the personnel around him. It would appear that the money doesn't matter, that's not going to be, sometimes money talks, and in this situation, it's not talking loud enough. So that's not the situation there. But it just feels like this is going to be much ado about nothing, and he's going to show up next week and act like nothing happened, because that's the arrogance that he kind of carries himself with, and put the blame on the media. Everyone will go back to normal. All those Packer Twitter people that you were talking about are going to come out of the woodwork and come rip us for everything that we've said all off season. And it'll just be normal. But I do think that there's something there. Like, there's something that you can't deny this anymore. It's not just him being aloof and being Aaron Rodgers. This is a situation that needs to be fixed if you're a Packer fan. And if you're a Viking fan, again, we said this when it first popped up on draft night. This is the stuff that usually happens to us. So sit back, revel in it. Revel in whatever holdout there may or may not be, and the questions of whether or not he's going to be happy, or what this looks like for the future. If he comes back this year, this is going to happen again next year. It's not just going to go away. So, this is just different. So we don't know how to act. We don't know how to handle it. So that's why we continue to talk about it and continue to cover it. And it's not just us, okay? This is not just Minnesota Vikings fans looking for something to rub in the Packers' face because they can rub Lombardi's in our face. This is the NFL. I mean, this is the entire league. This is the national media. It's not local media. This is not us digging up something. This is national media, the biggest of the big, Adam Schefter, who's breaking this news, continuing to push this out. He's the one who was on draft night, right? Wasn't he the one who kind of came up the piggyback of PA's report that San Francisco was interested in kicking the tires on Aaron Rodgers, and that's kind of what started this whole situation. So he's been on it since day one, and it hasn't gone away. What was the date? Was that April or May?
Yeah, it would have been late April or early May,
April?
one of the two.
2.5 months ago, almost 3 months ago. I mean, this is not a non-issue. Let's leave it at that. I guess it's not a non-issue, and we're gonna have to see where it plays out. Again, this is also a Minnesota sports fan thing, is to hinge the success of our team on if or if not Aaron Rodgers will play. I think that this team has the opportunity to win the division whether he does or doesn't play. But if he doesn't play, that really does change a lot when it comes to the way that the division shakes out.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I was actually going to say that if you didn't say it right there, I was going to say, I think with Aaron Rodgers in the division or without Aaron Rodgers in the division, this Vikings team on paper is good enough to go out and win 12, 13 games and end up potentially winning the NFC North. One interesting thing to look at with all of this Aaron Rodgers stuff is it interests me. I would love to be a fly on the wall within that organization right now from the top down. Like, this has to affect, like, what does this say to a Devontae Adams, who also, by the way, I think might be in a contract year, and I don't know if he wants to play in Green Bay if Aaron Rodgers isn't there. What does this say about, or say to Jordan Love, who they took with a first-round draft pick last year, and now they're coming out and saying, hey, we're willing to pay Aaron Rodgers, extend him for, I think it was 2 years, so he'd be in Green Bay for 5 more years, completely negating your rookie contract. I feel like there's problems galore within that organization that stem from Aaron Rodgers doing this. And even if he gets back in that locker room, I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of how everything plays out over the next couple of years.
It's just the best. It's just the best. I don't know how else to put it. Again, I'm not trying to. I have family that are Packer fans. I have friends that are Packer fans. I don't want to completely put them out, but for years and years and years, this has been us. This has been what we've had to deal with. It's just fun to see that it is something different. It's not in our locker room. It's not in at TCO. It's not. It's it's just it's something different. Darth. What is this? Darth Diculous. It's fun when it's not us. That's the best way to put it. Honorum says the same sort of thing. When it's not about the Vikings, it's good. So, Jack, I think that's all we got this week. Again, we got probably a longer show next week because we're going to do some preview stuff for training camp. positional breakdowns, stuff to look for, players to watch, those sorts of things. So let's call it a day, maybe a little early for this round, and start that prep. We'll start getting going and really getting ready for next week, because that's when it really does become a grind. Jack, I know you've seen this on Twitter. I know you saw it on the Power Trip. You also worked with Joe Johnson from UFTA Sports, Purple PTSD, Vikings territory. So any opportunity we have to kind of honor him within this Vikings sphere is a good opportunity to do that. So I know that you were sending your condolences to his family as well. Joe Johnson passed away this last week. A big part of the Vikings community, social community, online blog community. And was doing some really good things over at purpleptsd.com and vikingsterritory.com. So, Jack, I know you've dealt with him and worked with him a while back. I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add, but by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, and I haven't really publicly spoke about this. I know we have the Slack chat for Vikings territory and stuff like that. And thoughts and prayers are with all those guys and girls that are working within that system as well, because Joe had such a good and positive impact on the Vikings community as a whole. I don't think I'd be sitting here doing this podcast with you if it wasn't for Joe Johnson. Because when I reached out to Joe was when I was just kind of wrapping up with my internships with the Vikings, and I didn't want to let it go. I knew I graduated from school with journalism, didn't quite have the experience to go and try to apply for some of the full-time NFL internships. So I just kind of shot a note to him, and he opened me with wide open arms and kind of gave me that avenue to continue reporting / covering, doing whatever I really wanted to. I started another podcast, made a friendship with another person who doesn't even live in the state of Minnesota. He lives in Ohio through that podcast. And all of that is possible to Joe Johnson. So yeah, I send my condolences to his family as well, and anyone else that kind of had a similar interaction with him that I did, because I know it was kind of a reoccurring theme on Twitter. There was so many people that had that same image of Joe, kind of saying they don't think they'd be within this industry if it wasn't for his kind of positive outlook and his willingness to help people within the Vikings blogging industry. So yeah, my thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends at this time. Obviously it was a gut punch. I think you probably said that. That might've been your words exactly on the air on the Power Trip, but it was a gut punch. And there's nothing else I can really say about it. He left a great impression and mark on the industry that we're in today.
Yeah, no doubt. That was a go-getter. He knew what he was doing, and he knew how to do it, and he wouldn't stop until he got it done. So condolences to Joe and his family and all his friends that are out there. So on that note, we'll send you into next week and let us all prepare for Minnesota Vikings training camp and some previews for the actual season and actual football. Jack, we'll see you later, man.
Sounds good.
10 seconds to go. We need a Minneapolis miracle. Case on a deep drop. Steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side. Off by Diggs. Stay up. Oh my God.